By the year 2050, Europe is supposed to become climate neutral. In many areas, we see progress with decarbonization. But there is one bucking the trend: transport. The emissions in Europe in transport actually have been increasing and have been reaching 30% of a share. What can we do? What can be the contribution coming from the EU with regard to the Green Deal and its application in transport? So, ladies and gentlemen, I give you a cordial welcome on the occasion of the event Debating Europe, dedicated to this question. So it's about the Fit for 55 package presented by the EU Commission a week ago on Wednesday. But first of all, allow me to link us to Wiesbaden to listen to State Secretary for European Affairs of the State of Hessen, Mark Weinmeister. I am happy to give you a cordial welcome also on behalf of my minister, Lucia Puttrich, for this event, One Click to Europe, dedicated to transport and the European Green Deal. I'm ever so happy that Commissioner Vălean is a member of the Commission we could convince to join us. Thank you for doing this. And I already give a cordial thank you to Silke Wettach as our moderator today. Ms. Wettach is the EU correspondent of the Wirtschaftswoche. The European Green Deal is the big challenge for the European Commission led by President Ursula von der Leyen. The ambitious targets, climate neutrality by 2050 and strengthening the climate objectives by 2030 are factors that have an impact on the entire field of the economy and beyond even. We as citizens, we as consumers, also in Hessen, will see the impact and feel the impact. Well, questions relating to transport and mobility are important also for our region. I'm aware of the following. In many areas, since 1990, we achieved a lot, introducing new technology, reducing CO2 emissions, kissing goodbye to old technologies. So we approach the climate objective. But these efficiency gains we achieved in the area of mobility and the improvement of the emission numbers have been nearly completely offset by the intensification of traffic flows and mobility. So, in other words, we require new ideas, new approaches, new options in order to see progress. Hessen is at the heart of Europe. So, on the one hand, we are a classical transit region. And that means that our businesses also have to do a lot with mobility questions. And on the other hand, we have Frankfurt Airport, one of the three huge hubs we have in the European Union. So that's part of Hessen, and that means that this is a very essential question for us indeed. The Hessian state government follows the motto, efficiency first. In other words, we look at each individual sector to understand what has to happen, what can happen. When we think of passenger cars and light goods vehicles, we opt for a full electrification. That's understood. When we look at heavy goods transport, then it's also hydrogen-based technologies we have to think of. And real tough call is aviation. Here, to look at battery-based, electricity-based, hydrogen-based options, there are still difficulties here. But we want to be trailblazers in Hessen in this regard as well. To replace kerosene by biofuels is one important area of action in order to achieve the decarbonization for aviation as well. We have the House of Logistics and Mobility, in short, HOLM, and that enabled us to develop a lot of approaches, and we have even a competence center that supports this pathway. And we have the industrial estate Höchst, supported by the state government of Hessen, with their developments leading towards synthetic and e-fuels for the aviation sector. Our goal is to work via the admixture rates. Right now it's 0.5%, very meager. So we want to increase that by 400%, reaching 2% admixture rates. And over the next month, we will be busy just doing that job. And there are other aspects relating to mobility where we are busy. For example, with regard to local transport, we have the concept Hessen 2035 in order to replace more and more individual transport, which leads us towards more and more climate neutrality. With this, obviously, it's easier to achieve that in a conurbation than in a rural area. But we have to see both in order to really share the effort. So I'm very eager, very excited when I think of the exchange today, listening to Commissioner Vălean having an exchange with Mrs. Wettach. We in Hessen are determined to make our contribution towards climate neutrality as well, and we fully support the Commission with their efforts. I look forward to an exciting debate. I look forward to learn a lot, to get a lot of information, and I thank you very much already for your kind attention. Well, we already heard a lot of aspects, and we will more go in depth when we have our exchange. Just a little additional information. We look forward to reaching your questions. You can send us an email. That's streamline@lv-brussels with ui.hessen.de. And you can grab the phone in order to give us your phone. 0032 472 030181.
So welcome, Commissioner Vălean. She's also in Brussels in her office, a couple of 100 meters away from us. Welcome, Adina Vălean, EU Commissioner for Transport. I'm delighted to have you here, and I'll give the floor to you without further ado. You've prepared a little overview to give us a flavor of what you're going to be working on in the next 2 years.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to share my thoughts with you today on how transport policy can contribute to our European Green Deal objectives. But first of all, I would like to express my heartfelt condolences to the families and friends of those that lost their lives in the devastating floods of the past week, as well as my deepest sympathy for all of those who have lost so much. And I know there is so much to rebuild. We need to come together on this, and it's truly encouraging to see the strong solidarity among citizens in times like this. As you know, just last week, the Commission tabled an extensive package of policy proposals that aims to cut European greenhouse gas emissions by 55% by 2030. This target is now a legal obligation under the EU's climate law. And of course, as a source of around 29% of all greenhouse gas emissions, transport must contribute to these ambitious targets too. But we need to do this in a smart way, without overburdening citizens and businesses who rely on transport for their daily lives and operations. We must curb emissions while stepping up competitiveness, reinforcing the single market, creating new opportunities for European businesses to flourish. So this is the challenge. I am proud to put forward 3 positive progressive proposals as part of the overall package, namely Refuel EU Aviation, Fuel EU Maritime, and the Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Regulation. All 3 are designed to ensure we have the sustainable alternative fuels and the underlying infrastructure needed to cut transport emissions in road, aviation and maritime transport. These proposals aim to break the chicken and egg situation that transport has been locked into for long. Today, people are and companies are reluctant to invest in clean fleets and fuels because the energy supply infrastructure is unavailable or sustainable fuel costs are too high. And in turn, no one wants to invest in the infrastructure because the demand is too little. So this is the dilemma we are trying to break with our proposals. I hope they will change this and help make the EU a lead market for cutting-edge sustainable transport technologies and advanced renewable and sustainable fuels. The benefits will extend beyond reducing emissions and air pollution to improving energy security, reducing our reliance on fossil imports, and creating new jobs and industries. Regions like Hesse are well placed to benefit from the transition. Frankfurt Airport is Hesse's largest employer and one of the Europe's busiest airports, and you already have a head start with your work on power-to-liquid fuels at Höchste Industrial Park. With our RefuelEU proposal, we will support the scaling up of such technologies. All aviation fuels supplied at EU airports will have to contain at least 2% of sustainable aviation fuels by 2025 and 5% by 2030. This target will progressively ramp up to 63% in 2050, in line with industry's production and deployment capacity. I firmly believe that the transition to the sustainable alternative fuels is essential to decarbonize aviation, as liquid fuels will dominate until 2050 for medium and long-haul flights. These sustainable alternative fuels also have the huge advantage to be already compatible with existing aircraft engines and do not require any new infrastructure at airports. Our proposed regulation focuses on the most innovative, sustainable, and scalable fuels, such as advanced biofuels and synthetic fuels, including power-to-liquid. We believe that the vast majority of these fuels could be produced in EU with the right incentives. This includes, of course, our proposal on refuel aviation, but also the future strategic alliance for a renewable and low carbon fuels value chain, which we are preparing. And this alliance would allow for the net creation, we hope, of additional jobs, up to 200,000 jobs in Europe, mainly in the renewable sector. Alongside the RefuelEU aviation, we are reforming the single European sky, reinforcing the emission trading system for aviation, and implementing CORSIA with the aim to cut emissions. We are also funding research and innovation to prepare for zero-emission aircraft and for more efficient air traffic management technologies. And finally, airports are also playing their role in becoming climate neutral. The Frankfurt Airport itself is part of the airport's carbon accreditation program. Well done. The challenge to curb emissions in air transport is immense, but with the right policy tools in place and the determination of the industry, I'm confident that we will successfully deliver. I have focused on aviation because I know that this is very important to Hesse, but the state's central location in Germany and in Europe makes it an intersection for several key transport routes, including 3 multimodal 10T corridors. And I was happy to see the Hesse authorities working on smart solutions and technologies that can increase efficiency in the transport system. It's clear that the current network capacity was starting to feel the strain. Of course, it's clear now too that additional investments may be needed to address damages caused by the recent floods, and that all our future investments should pay particular attention to climate resilience. Ongoing and planned investments in railway, because of the existence of bottlenecks, will help improve the competitiveness of rail in the region and ease some of the pressure on roads. The state's work on alternative transport concepts and extra intermodal hubs will also help free up roads while cutting emissions. And here comes our proposal on alternative fuel infrastructure, which is an additional string in our Green Deal policy bow, targeting more recharging and refueling points along the TEN-T network for low and zero emission vehicles. And Hesse will certainly feel the difference once this infrastructure is in place. So, ladies and gentlemen, I have presented some of the ways in which our policies are putting us on the Green Deal path, but we won't get there through EU policies alone. We need a transport sector on side, and we need the member states on side. So it's clear that Hesse is a key contributor and an example for other regions. Decarbonization will be challenging, that's clear, but it is needed, and it offers new opportunities for growth and competitiveness, including in sustainable fuels. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You've mentioned the chicken and egg problem, and you've said so far there has been too little investment in green infrastructure, and you're really trying to break this vicious circle. What kind of feedback have you received from member states since you put forward the proposal last week?
It's absolutely clear that the member states in Europe, also if we look in between regions, they are at a different pace in decarbonization, in developing new technologies, in implementing them, also difference in the situation regarding average income for citizens. So the impact will be different. So that's why also member states, looking at our proposals, they will approach them on behalf of their citizens, let's say, with worries on one point or another. Some with more ambition, some with less ambition. Some more worried on the impact on the citizens, others less doing so. If I'm looking at the refuel EU aviation, I would say that member states may ask for the option to add national targets. Some may ask for an increase on targets and sub-targets, and a new sub-target for advanced biofuels. Others may ask for a reduction in the scope, for example, the exclusion of islands member states, which are so much dependent on aviation. On fuel EU maritime, some member states might worry on the geographical scope, and of course there will be those that support their shipping industry. I know that the issue of the cost of onshore power supply investments in ports is also of concern, but we need to do that because this is a chance for us to clean the air on ports and for the cities which are coastal regions. Also in the alternative fuels infrastructure regulation, I think some member states will have issues, may raise concerns about the mandatory fleet-based targets. Opposition is also likely regarding the ambitious targets. But I think in the end, taking into consideration worries and finding the right balance, they will find out that our proposals are already balanced, and we have very carefully scrutinized all the options, and we had very thorough impact assessment. So I hope they will be supportive in the end.
You actually had a lot of contact with member states beforehand. Have you sounded out your proposals?
Yes, this is something regular what we are doing. We are widely consulting before proposing something. So this is, of course, something which we regularly do.
I just heard there was so little time this time round that it was kind of compressed and not done in the usual fashion, but it's reassuring to hear from you that you have done this extensively. What kind of...
I'm referring to my three proposals, which were ready even in spring, so we had enough time for them. Of course, the whole package is very complex, and there are many interlinks, and fine-tune between various proposals inside the package, and some of them probably have been, let's say, discussed more in depth and more difficult to sell.
Since you're mentioning it now, I'm going to take it up now. One of the big challenges of the package is the fact that you have over a dozen proposals and their interlinkages. How can the Commission actually make sure that at the end of the negotiations we'll have a sound package that is coherent, that reaches the goals? Because it's a tremendous challenge. I'm not quite sure how you're going to deal with it even, because you've got parallel negotiations in the Parliament, in the Council. It's really quite staggering. I mean, it's a huge task.
Well, it's true, but I think all the proposals Fit for 55 been developed in an integrated way. And I'm stating that because they all are made use of the same reference scenario. And I think the analysis was very in depth for each of the proposal. It's true that substantive effort went into reviewing the coherence of the interlinkages between the proposal. But this was needed because there is no single measure that is the silver bullet solution for greening of the entire transport sector. So the basket of measure needs to be assessed as a whole. But don't get me wrong, we didn't finish. Because as we stated in, so basically this Fit for 55, it brings, it puts a price on carbon. So it's tackling from this angle, also gives, addresses sustainable alternative fuels, the creation of the market for aviation and maritime. It also aims at deploying the infrastructure for recharging and refueling public points in Europe, so that we will have a coherence all over Europe, and someone who has a low or an electric car would be able to travel across Europe without worrying that they won't find the proper infrastructure. And you know that nowadays 70% of the recharging infrastructure is concentrated just in 3 member states. And of course, the rest of the map, it's missing a lot. So these are kind of measures, but the basket contains other. And I myself, I put it in the strategy for sustainable and smart mobility. Some of these measures to be adopted further in time. So we will address, I don't know, urban mobility plans, for example. We will address the freight corridors to encourage more the shift towards sustainable sectors like is the railway. So there is a bouquet, it's a basket of things. Part of them are in the Fit for 55, but the work does not stop here, because decarbonizing transport is very important, but very complex also.
Thank you. You just mentioned charging. 70% at the moment of the charging stations are concentrated in 3 member states. Have you had any feedback? Have you heard back from states how they feel about it? I mean, you know, think of your home country. I'm not sure how keen citizens are to take up electric vehicles. It's, you know, it's a matter of cost. It's not that they wouldn't want to, but at this point in time, electric cars are just out of reach for many households.
Well, it's true, it's challenging, because I said from the beginning that the situation is so different in the various member states. And our proposal is going to put on the map on the 20 corridors, and according to the take-up in the market of electrical vehicles, the right public infrastructure. But having public infrastructure, it's not enough in a decision to buy an electric car. You have to have a very well developed private charging infrastructure. So people won't buy a car if they don't have where to plug it at home. And it's true that you mentioned my country. In many former communist countries, the forced planned development of housing and economy made the appearance of a big block of flats with, I don't know, 100 apartments and without parking lots. So you cannot imagine living in such a place. You would have the possibility to charge each family its 1 or 2 cars. So of course there are going to be specificities. It's work in progress, and it's true again that at this stage, even though the sales of electric cars have risen all over Europe, very accelerated, they are still less than 1% of the sales. So the interest right now for electric cars, it's not exactly shown by the market, but we hope that with this kind of incentive in infrastructure development, will encourage the take-up. It will be needed that the governments, the regions will put in place additional incentives or support schemes for those who want to make the transition towards electric.
Thank you. Now we've got the first questions coming in. First question is from Gregor Schusterschitz, Körper 1 representative of Austria. He's writing, the Brenner is one of the most sensible transport corridors in Europe, which needs to be decarbonized, but it has, due to its geography, limited road capacity. The new Eurovignette directive, unfortunately, will not help to achieve a modular shift towards more rail transport. Which possibilities do you see to bring the Brenner transit in line with the ambitions of our climate policy? Very specific question. I'm hoping for a very specific answer.
Yes, this is a very sensitive subject, because a part of the importance of it in our TEN-T network in Europe, it connects 3 countries along the corridor, but the pass itself, it's owned by one. So it's and by the other hand, it's very sensitive because it was highly politicized. I would say that for Brenner, already European Union put a lot of money in developing one of its flagship projects, and will continue to do so. It's the Brenner Bay Tunnel. And the moment this will be completed, then the problem will be solved, and of course the rail will be the star of the corridor there. In the meantime, of course, the countries which are on the corridor, Italy, Austria, and Germany, they will have to come together and find a good compromise on the use of the corridor, so that will be open, responding to the needs, and in the same time sustainable. Eurovignette was a good proposal. For me, the compromise found in the Council is a weak one, but nevertheless, it still contains some elements which might contribute together with others to the find of a solution for the sustainability of Brenner. And this being said, I'm also saying that under the European Year of Rail, I invited the 3 parties from the corridor to have, well, supported by us, of course, and by the coordinator of the corridor, Mr. Pat Cox, to have a meeting, a high-level meeting, try to rediscuss and convene on the right approach for this sensitive area.
Do you have any ideas where this could be going? If people are reconvening, what could be the outcome?
We have proposed already several times. There is a box of solutions, like a toolbox, from which they will have to choose and agree. pricing is one of the part of the solution. So that's why I was, and probably that's why the co-rapper from Austria was mentioning the Eurovignette. But this is just part of the solution. We will have to, as in everything, tackle it through a basket of measures, but I want them to convene on what they need to do, because divergent views and unilateral approach cannot be accepted along a European corridor, because it's against the definition of it.
The next question comes from Andreas Brieger from the German Trade Union Association DGB. He's in charge of Europe. This is my translation. He says, hydrogen has been sold as a magic wand in the green transition, but unfortunately there won't be enough green hydrogen, at least in the short run, to satisfy demand, and hydrogen of other colors don't really contribute anything positive to the Green Deal. How would you see this? What kind of scenarios for hydrogen do you envisage, do you find useful, and where would you actually be hesitant or completely against using hydrogen? And he says there's this myth of technological neutrality. So you could probably elaborate a bit on how you see the usefulness of different types of hydrogen.
Well, hydrogen is indeed very promising, and we are betting a lot on it, because it's one of the sustainable alternatives. Of course, it is appropriate in some situations and less in others. To give you an example, for example, for the maritime, it might be an opportunity to use hydrogen in short sea shipping or for ferries, for example, but not in deep sea transport. In aviation, it's less interesting, because this would basically, generally, when you need a fuel which has higher energy, high density in energy, then hydrogen is less attractive. But then again, we have seen a lot of movement in passenger cars on hydrogen. We have seen a promise and commitments coming from the industry, for example, in heavy-duty vehicles, that hydrogen is an alternative to regular fuels. And of course, we have put in our alternative fuel infrastructure the deployment of hydrogen charging refueling points at 150 kilometers each along the TEN-T corridor. So we are trying again to incentivize, by developing the infrastructure, also the deployment of vehicles. We have seen pilots with hydrogen for rail there, where electrification it does not make sense. And I'm pleased to say that I have seen, even in our recovery and resilience plans proposed by the member states, a lot of projects which include hydrogen. So I would say this is still promising. It is something I myself would be very keen to support intensively also. But again, I hope that production will increase for hydrogen in Europe. Of course, green hydrogen if possible. Let's not forget that we are taking whatever if we can decarbonize quickly. So it might be that transitional also blue hydrogen will be a good deliverable. These are some of my thoughts regarding hydrogen, but this is a discussion which will continue for sure. We have created this alliance, the value chain on renewable hydrogen, I think it's called. So we have various instruments in our policy system at European Commission to support hydrogen.
Let's talk about aviation. You've just mentioned that hydrogen is not an option for aviation because aviation requires higher density in energy. Some people have criticized your proposal as being very hesitant. You mentioned the numbers. What you're envisaging, sort of first going up to 2% and then to 5%. Of e-fuels for planes. What is your answer? Is it reasonable, or is it not, just too slow?
We had this discussion, but actually we have tried to be also realistic, not only ambitious, because these are the numbers on which this can be provided. So as I was saying, we don't have yet sufficient production for this sustainable alternative fuels, and we are trying to give the industry, the energy industry, the predictability for the market in order to develop it. So I would say I said that they are realistic. Basically, what we try to favor here was the quality of the alternative fuels over the quantity, because we need to encourage the sustainable supply chains. We don't need, no matter what alternative fuel, we want a clean one. And that's why we target only the most innovative and most sustainable types. For example, we are excluding the crop-based fuels from this, from the scope of our proposal. But if we would have put higher targets, according to our analysis, then we would have compromised on sustainability, allowing crop-based fuels or relying heavily on imported feedstock, which has less guarantees on its sustainability. Yeah, this was the basic thinking, and of course we have modeled intensively to be as ambitious as possible.
But that means basically that the supply won't be ramped up that quickly. If you say you're being realistic, you've just had a proper look at what you can expect to be on the market. Yeah, I see you're nodding.
Yes, exactly. If you want, I can insist on this. So again, we need to provide sufficient lead time for the industry to scale up and start with realistic objectives to give the market time to kickstart. If we set unrealistic expectations and targets being too high, this would have had unintended consequences, such imposing heavy penalties on our industry for non-compliance. This is an extra argument I'm giving you. So apart from the fact that then it would have started a race for less sustainable alternative fuels because there are not enough on the market.
Okay, so let's dwell a bit on aviation. I know it's just so important for Hesse, and I know this is a bit beyond your remit. There was also a proposal on taxation, the taxation of kerosene. I was really struck by the fact that cargo was not included. I'm asking you as a transport commissioner, what's the explanation behind it? I mean, I kind of think, was it DHL that came to the commission that was lobbying hard?
I have no information on, but I suppose in preparing this regulation, everybody spoke with everybody, and it's normal to do so, because we are not producing policies here under a glass screen and not talking with the real ones who are supposed to apply it. I think from my perspective, or from what I know, there are some air service regulations which would create some obligations. So I think this is part of the story why cargo was accepted. Yeah, I don't know more much than this, and I don't think it goes with favoring one or another. But taxation on the kerosene is something which, well, it's true that would create an incentive also in order to blend it with alternative fuels. But as I said, it has to be also realistic, the blending, because if there are not enough there, then you cannot expect much. Then the alternative solutions like an electric aircraft, this is available just for small ones, and in long and short hauls, this is hydrogen will come much later. So for the moment, decarbonizing the fuels means just this blending mandate, and with limited resources at the stage. In time, of course, when this will increase its share, then probably it would be helpful. But this is a price measure, putting a price on carbon. So yeah, it was not exactly my file. So
I know,
I know. On this one.
I know. But since we were talking about aviation, I thought it's good to ask. We've got another question from a viewer, Professor Martina Kleerle from Frankfurt University. She's a professor for renewable energies, and she's got just a little hint. She says she's got a private station for electricity, a charging station, but so far she is not allowed to sell the electricity to anyone who's driving past with an electric vehicle, because she's not an energy supplier. She's not a utility, and she says there is a similar, this is the setup that applies nearly to the entire EU. And she makes a very valid point that if you actually live in the countryside, and private entities could provide charging stations, it would actually make it so much easier to ramp up the creation of a real network and have like nationwide supplies in member states. And she says the cost was just 600 euro of her private supply station. So yeah, what is your take on that? Should private people be able to sell electricity?
Well, this goes again a bit outside of my mandate. It's transport. It goes with the organization of the energy market in Europe. But what I tried to do with this infrastructure was exactly not to become too prescriptive. Who is allowed to do what, who has access at what? Because my view was that I will allow the member states to organize the take-up of this infrastructure the way they see fitted. If they want to bet more on private investments, if they want to bet more in public investments, it's up to the member states to decide. On this being allowed or not to sell electricity, this goes with the energy market, so I wouldn't know exactly the answer right now, but I think it's more a national approach towards it. I'm not sure it is the same thing everywhere.
Yeah, I think the outcome might be the same. She wasn't referring that, you know, maybe it's not regulated EU-wide, but the outcome might be pretty similar. And I think the last point just shows how many interlinkages we have and how huge the challenge is, because there's so many points that need to be looked at to really transform the European economy and our society to become greener and carbon neutral. Commissioner, I thank you so much for joining us. It was very insightful. You'll be very busy during the next 2 years at least, if you make it in 2 years. And I would just like to point out to our viewers that we have another live stream coming up from the state representation of Hesse on the 22nd of July. I think that is on Thursday, it's the day after tomorrow, at 1 o'clock, and it'll be on sustainability in the financial sector, perspectives on the taxonomy regulation. Well, I would thank you very much all for tuning in, and I wish you a lovely afternoon. Goodbye from Brussels.